Should transgender teachers be allowed to return to work? From CN8, the Comcast network, recognized with an Emmy Award for Outstanding Talk Program for the 4th consecutive year. It's Your Call starts now.
If a teacher has a sex change, should he or she still be allowed to return to teaching? Or would that be too confusing to the students? Could you accept a transgender person? Or is it all a bit too much for you to grasp? Tell us your opinion on the teacher who had a sex change right now on It's Your Call. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Doyle, and our topic tonight is one that some might find a bit disturbing. It's about people who have had sex changes. They are called transgenders, and we're hearing more and more about them these days. One case right here in our region has sparked a legal battle and a moral debate. Here it is in a nutshell. William Macbeth was married with children and taught at an elementary school in New Jersey as a substitute. He then underwent a sex change and became Lily Macbeth. But when she wanted to return to work, she was met with some resistance from some parents who thought the whole situation was a bit much to explain to their youngsters. We're going to hear more on that from you in just a moment, but here's the reaction from that school district. We get that from Jam Sardar right off the top.
There was no screaming, no shouting about the presence and status of Lily Macbeth. The presence of 3 state troopers kept tempers of the evenly divided crowd in check. But there was no shortage of passion as citizens talked about the substitute teacher with the sex change. Critics, drawn to the meeting by a full-page ad in the local paper, say elementary kids are just too young to understand.
What I decide is right for my child should matter more than what this man or woman decides for my child. This subject is so hard for adults to deal with, so why are we willing to expose innocent young children to try and deal with it?
I like this one, Mrs. Doubtfire. Rating PG-13 for strong sexual content.
But parents and students who had Mr., now Ms. Macbeth, say it shouldn't and doesn't make a difference.
As a substitute teacher, she was completely competent and adequate. I don't see that having a sex change operation should be an issue. She's still a person. I don't see how anything has changed.
It's a little weird. It's a little different. It hasn't really come up before in our lives, but it has now, and, you know, they're fine with it. As a matter of fact, they would probably choose Lily Macbeth over some other substitute teachers.
Some parents say they simply won't expose their children to the issue or Macbeth.
I wouldn't want them, this teacher to teach my child, and if she's going to, I might call up every single day and say, is she going to substitute my class? Because if she is, Kristen's not coming.
But the woman at the center of the controversy says she has no agenda. She just wants to teach.
I have nothing to hide. I am who I am, and I'm proud of it. And why shouldn't I be?
When all was said and done, this very emotional meeting ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. School board officials saying Macbeth is and will continue to be a substitute teacher. Now she's just waiting for that call to get back in the classroom. In Ocean County, New Jersey, Jam Sardar, CN8 News.
Thank you, Jam. Now that you've heard what the people in that New Jersey school district has to say about Lily Macbeth returning to work, let's get some reaction from our panel. Tonight they include Stacy Sobel, who is the executive director of the Center for Lesbian and Gay Civil Rights in Philadelphia, an old friend of our show. We're glad that she's back. Also joining us once again is Mark Houck, is the chastity educator for Generation Life, which is a movement of young people spreading the message of pro-life and chastity. Also joining us tonight, Mara Keasley, who is the executive director of the National Center for Transgender Equality in Washington, D.C. She knows many transgender-identified teachers. And finally, our last panelist is the Reverend Stephen Kraft, who is an ordained minister with the American Baptist Churches and the executive director of the Christian Citizen Ministry, Incorporated. And we're glad to have all of them with us tonight. Welcome for what I think is going to be a very informational dialogue. I want to put Mark on the It's Your Call hot seat. Good to have you back with us.
Good to be back.
Why is it that you would oppose someone like Lily Macbeth or hundreds others who are like her from teaching in our classrooms?
Well, in thinking about this program tonight, I had to first think that I'd be very sensitive to this man, and something has clearly gone very wrong for him to take the measures that he's taken. But I'm here tonight as a child advocate, and to say that this is confusing to the young people. I'm a former middle school teacher, and I'm educated, certified for secondary education, and I think that this is going to do, the fallout of this will be young people will become desensitized to this type of behavior. It'll be normalized, and it will encourage them to question their own gender and ultimately create an arrested development in them.
Stacy, I know that you also are an advocate, but what about kids? Do you think that kids could be harmed by being exposed to someone like Lily?
Absolutely not. Children are very resilient, and I think that children who come and meet people with an open mind will be able to meet her and understand that she's a teacher and will benefit from the teaching. The thing that's important about Lily is that she's a good teacher. She was a good teacher before, and she's a good teacher now. And that's what we want for our students, is to get that kind of exposure. It's about the job she does.
Reverend, is it about the job, or is it about a deeper argument? Is it about a moral question?
As a minister of the gospel, Lynn, it is definitely a spiritual, a theological, and a moral issue from my perspective. Let me state my presupposition. I am an ordained fundamentalist Christian minister. I'm 62 years old. All of my 62 years, and I am very set and hardened in my ways when it comes to these issues. I love people. What people do is their business. But I use the scriptures as my presupposition and starting point. And homosexuality in all of its forms, along with other sexual deviations, are wrong. That's where that's my starting point.
Okay, Mara, let's address that. Do you think that someone who is transgendered is a deviant, has a sexual problem, or is that a misconception that people have today?
It's completely a misconception. First of all, I should say I know Lily Macbeth. She's a fabulous person, a wonderful teacher. She is nobody who any parent, and I am a parent, by the way, she is nobody who any parent would be worried about. She's just a spectacular person, and it's just a misconception that transgender people are, other than in this one way, different than anybody else. There is no, it just isn't true. There's no basis for it, and I'm certainly not going to debate Scripture with the Reverend, but his position is not a unified one among people of the cloth.
Well, we're going to find out whether it's unified among our viewers. If you'd like to join in and tell us what you think, we would certainly like to hear from you. Do you think that kids can accept a teacher that started out as one gender but ends up as another? Or is that just not something you want your kids exposed to? Many ways for you to be active here with us. Of course, as you know, you can give us a call. It is toll-free from wherever you are watching across the country. I can see the telephone lines lighting up as we speak. You can also email me or take our web poll. They're both located at cn8.tv. And I want to try to see if we can inform as well as debate during this dialogue today. Maybe we could explain the terminology so that we all use it in the proper fashion. When someone is a transgender, what does that mean?
Do you want to? I'll say that. A transgender person is a person who identifies as the sex opposite than they were born as. A person's gender identity is about their gender. It actually has nothing to do with their sexual orientation. It's about who they see themselves as a man or a woman, and it manifests itself in a number of different ways. And Lily Macbeth and people who are transgender want to live in the life that they identify as.
And is this something that typically a person struggles with for a greater part of their life?
It's a very difficult thing for people to work with. I know and have worked with many transgender people, and this is nothing that anyone does lightly. This is a very serious thing, but it's also a very important thing for their own well-being, and I think their friends, their families, their coworkers, and people that know them actually see the positive changes that happen with people who transition.
And Mark, you feel that that would be difficult for children of any age to comprehend, or just those who attend an elementary school, such as in this particular case?
Well, most especially in elementary school, Lynn. I mean, we're dealing with cognitive development stages here, emotional, social, and these kids are just struggling to relate to the opposite sex in general. And so now they have a teacher who they've known as a male, now all of a sudden is a female in front of them, and it is very confusing. And I would say, to Stacy's point, that he identified himself for 65 years as a male, and now he's identifying himself as a female. I don't understand how that can happen.
It doesn't usually occur overnight. It's really a process. People who are transgender experience over a long period of time. It's not that they just wake up one day and say, oh, I want to be different. This is a very difficult thing that they often have to work through. And part of it is because of what society says. And I think when it comes to children, they might actually have an easier time of it than adults do, because adults already have these preconceived notions about gender and what it means to be a man or a woman, and they're the ones who I think will have a harder time. I think that if you say to a child in a simple way, in a fair way, and explain the situation, I think a child is actually able to understand it in sort of a limited scope. And what's important to them is that they're going to have a teacher who's going to take the time to be with them and to explain to them. And I think that's what most kids are looking for in school.
It's interesting, Mark. Interesting thing about diversity of all kinds. Nature loves diversity. Nature, however you define it, nature as God, nature as whatever nature is, nature loves diversity. There's all different kinds of people out there. I know how I was born. I know I was born differently than other people who had male on their birth certificate. I've known that since I was 3 or 4 years old. Because I didn't do anything about it until I was 40 does not in any way diminish how I was created. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we know about diversity is that children revel in diversity. They get it. They understand there's lots of different people, and that's good. They understand that there's racial diversity and ability diversity and class diversity, and they work with that, and they love all their friends.
Well, let's let the Reverend address that, because obviously in church we're all taught that we should be tolerant and accepting and love all, that we were all God's children. Does that not include transgenders?
Okay, let me explain. The Lord loves everybody, so much so that he died for our sins and rose from the dead. But the Lord hates sin. I was a drug addict, a heroin addict in the streets of New York, Lynn, for years, from 1964 to 1976. And I made all kinds of excuses why I shot dope, from diversity, because I was black, and race, and I had all kinds of excuses for my sinful, wicked, and evil behavior. But it wasn't until I was facing death, it wasn't until I woke up in a jail cell and got sick and tired of being sick and tired and had to take personal responsibility for my mess, and recognize that the problem wasn't society, the problem wasn't others, the problem was the confusion. Let me finish, please. In my mind, once I came to that conclusion, then I stopped using drugs and I stopped making excuses for myself. I haven't used drugs since 1977. Now, when we talk about diversity as far as sexual issues, the last time I checked, there were 2 sexes, male and female. Now, all of a sudden, we have 3, 4, 5, and 6 sexes. When all my life, I knew that marriage meant a man and a woman. Now, all of a sudden, it's a man, 2 women, and a dog and a cat thrown in for good measure. Where does the insanity stop? Diversity has nothing to do with coming up with things that are just not true. Okay. It's ridiculous.
Well, I would just say that one way to stop the insanity is not with rhetoric about it being an insane thing. In fact, it's just not that simple, Reverend. In fact, we've always been taught that everybody is either XX chromosome or XY chromosome. That turns out not to be true. There are people with other chromosomes. Just scientifically, under the microscope, people are not all XX and XY. Now, does that mean there's more than 2 genders? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not as simple as it seems. And the story you told, and by the way, congratulations on going since 1977. That's amazing and wonderful. The story you told about coming to that place where you knew you had to do something and you knew you had to take personal responsibility, I've heard that same story from so many transgender people. I've been there myself, where I knew this isn't about what society is doing to me. This is about who I really am, who I was created as.
And on that note, I have to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation here, and we'd like to include you. If you're on the telephone line, you can tell us what you think. We're talking about a specific case of a teacher who's had a sex change and now wants to return to the elementary school where she is a substitute. Some parents are opposed to it. We want to know what you think about that. We're also talking about the whole concept of accepting someone who is a transgender person. If you'd like to join in, give us a call. You can also take our web poll at cn8.tv, which is asking if that transgender teacher should be allowed to resume work. We'll check in with that in just a few moments. More importantly, though, in 3 minutes, we're going to take your phone calls. Don't go away.
let them in, because we're gonna have to deal with it anyway when we get older, you know, with gays and transvestites and all that.
Generally speaking, probably not. Not if they were my children. It really just depends. It's a political thing, and I wouldn't want them to be pushing any message.
What's the difference between a transgendered person and a non-transgender person? I mean, everybody's people. People is a good teacher, she's a good teacher, it doesn't matter.
Some of the opinions of our viewers around the region when we asked them about a transgender teacher. The idea here, the teacher was a male for many, many years and at some point transitioned into being a female and now wants to return to the job that she had prior to the surgery. Some parents are opposed to that. What do you think? Is it something that you think kids can accept? Can they understand? Can they comprehend? Or are elementary students particularly just way too young for this kind of exposure? If you'd like to join in, you can email me or take our web poll. That's both at cn8.tv. More importantly, pick up the telephone and give us a call. Let's take our first call tonight. It's coming from Jerry. Jerry, good to have you with us.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. What do you think about this whole idea?
Well, I'm a grandfather, 3 grandsons, 2 daughters. And I really don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. I think the parents are overreacting. I believe it's second cousin to homophobia. And I don't see what difference it makes what's underneath this Lily skirt. I mean, she's not going to expose herself into class. She's just going to teach like anybody else.
All right, Mark, let's get some reaction to that. He used the second cousin to homophobia. I mean, certainly in this day and age, you know, when homosexuals are accepted and have rights and have, you know, fought to be considered equal individuals, is this the second cousin? Are we not looking at transgenders and saying, well, you're not a first-rate citizen or a first-class citizen?
Well, I would agree with Reverend Steve on this one, that we're basically dealing with a man who's homosexualized himself, because if he's trying to become a woman, he cannot, first of all, because he is a man. But basically what we're talking about in this is a homosexual lifestyle. If he chooses to engage in it. So it is what it is. The man, we cannot say our sexuality is based upon our physicality only. There's more to our sexuality than just the physical body parts. And so I do think that they are connected. And I think that this man, we have to call it what it is, Lynn, and that's mutual masturbation is what this man will be looking forward to if that's what he wants. But he can never have full complementarity with another man.
Well, having said that then, are you saying then that anyone who is a homosexual should not be allowed to teach as well? Because they would certainly be exposing a certain lifestyle to kids in that, if you held that opinion.
Well, I'm speaking directly about Mr. Macbeth, but I would say that those that are homosexual, it depends on the environment that they're teaching, but I think this is clearly to the young people. These kids have seen Mr. Macbeth as a man. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of a coworker. Think about it. You were relating to him as a peer. Now you're a man at the lunchroom, and you're talking to him, and you're supposed to be relating to him as a woman. You cannot do it. He is not a woman, and I think that just there is no complementarity there. It's bigger than just the kids. It's the parents. It's the whole school environment, and I think it will fall apart as a result.
Are you suggesting it's just the school environment, or that she shouldn't be in the community at all?
I'm saying he shouldn't be teaching, instructing children.
Okay.
I don't agree at all. You know, we have a number of states over the last few years have actually started implementing laws that prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender identity or expression, in particular because of people who don't understand that these people want to go to work, they want to do a good job. You know, Ms. Macbeth did a good job before, she's going to do a good job now, and New Jersey's law says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, and that covers teachers and everybody else. You know, I think it's a real American thing that we teach children, that if you go to work and you go to school and you work hard and you do a good job, you're going to be judged on the merits, not on who you are.
But what the
and that's
was
what
saying...
we're talking about. That's what the law says here, and that's what the law is in New Jersey. And I think that, you know, that it's right that she should be judged on the job she does, and that's what's important
but
here.
But that's what the Reverend was saying before, if I understood it clearly, is it's not about whether she can teach or not, whether she's a good teacher. It's the example which she is setting to those students to which she is teaching.
Well, she sets a good example. She's a good teacher.
She probably, let me correct myself. I'm not going to call Mr. Macbeth she. Mr. Macbeth is a man that has sexual gender confusion. There's no way can Mr. Macbeth have a baby. Mr. Macbeth is a man that is sexually confused about who he is. I'm not going to even call Mr. Macbeth she. Mr. Macbeth is not female. He may think and feel like she, but reality says something different. The problem that I see is the fact that we all, as human beings, have a propensity to any kind of evil practice. I laid my stuff out on the table. I would have a lot more respect for anyone struggling with any kind of issue if they simply took ownership of that issue and says, okay, I'm confused with this, I struggle with this, help me. I have many friends who were homosexuals, but they are not now. And they are in ministry, and they have started ex-homosexual ministries. Yet many homosexuals oppose them and say that you cannot change from being a homosexual, which is a lie. And I have a problem.
That's another show.
Reverend, it's really pretty interesting. You know, as late as the 1950s, there were church people around the country who were condemning left-handed people. They were teaching children not to be left-handed. There's all sorts of biblical imagery about good being on the right side of God, bad being on the left side of God. Left-handed people were bad. People have this tendency to look for people who aren't like them, and I'm sorry to use the word, but be bigoted towards them, and to be afraid of people because of their race or their immigration status, or because they have accents, or because they're women, or because they're men. And I don't know why we do this, but we do it. And that's just where we are now. We're at the point in our society in the United States where transgender people are a good target for that. I guarantee you, if you and I were having this conversation 30 years from now, and Lily Macbeth were here, you would be apologizing for her, for calling her a man, for calling her mentally ill.
Mara, but she was made a man. That's what she is. And you brought this up earlier about a creator. But you brought up the creator. And you know what? To say after 65 years, after fathering 3 children, you know, being a husband for 33 years, that you're basically denying the contrary wisdom of your creator when you now decide that, you know what, I think because I'm not seeing value in my fatherhood anymore, in my husbandry, or whatever, that now I think I'm just going to change my gender because I'm not finding fulfillment in that role anymore.
That's really what in that role has nothing to do with a person's gender identity. There are transgender people who are parents and who have lasting, loving relationships. It has nothing to do with that. And to dismiss it, really, you're minimalizing the difficulties that transgender people have to go through in being honest with themselves.
This man is hurting, Stacey. This man is hurting, and he needs counseling just like anybody else who finds himself struggling in life.
And that's why, you know, the American Psychiatric Association and other very prominent medical associations do, you know, work with transgender people and recognize that transgender people need appropriate care, and that means sometimes transitioning and living their lives as the gender that they see themselves as, because that is what is healthy for them.
I have to take a quick break. Jerry, I thank you for your telephone call. I'm assuming that your vote is to let Lily Macbeth teach regardless of what anyone else thinks.
Absolutely, she should be free to do it, and I think the Reverend just proved that it's a second cousin to homophobia.
All right, on that note, we'll take a break. We want to know if you agree with Jerry or if you agree with the Reverend. We'll be back to find out what you have to say about the transgender teacher right after this.
Now there's a fourth way to be interactive with It's Your Call. If you have a webcam and you're a Comcast subscriber, then send us your opinion via video mail. Now is your chance to be seen on It's Your Call. Visit our webpage to find out how. You're watching It's Your Call with Lynn Doyle.
Should a transgender teacher be allowed to return to his or her original position, or is that way too confusing for students to comprehend? Questions we're posing to you tonight in our second half hour of It's Your Call. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm Lynn Doyle. We're getting your thoughts on transgender teachers. If you'd like to join in and tell us what you think about this specific case, we'd certainly like to hear from you. Perhaps just in general, you have questions about this. If we can help or start some sort of dialogue, we'll be glad to do it. If you're on the telephone line, please stay with us. You can also email me, or you can take our web poll at cna.tv. Let's check in for the first time. We asked the question, should the transgender teacher be allowed to resume work? 51% say yes, 41% say no, and 8% have the solution to let her return in a different school. It's a non-scientific survey. We're going to leave that up and give you an opportunity to weigh in with your opinion. I'm going to go back to the telephone line, though, because Kim is on the line. She's our next call. I think she has a personal experience with this particular case that prompted tonight's discussion. Kim, good to have you with us.
Hi, thank you.
I understand, do you have a student in this school?
My son attends the school, yes.
Okay, so what's your feeling about the whole thing?
The way I look at it is I don't have a problem with him per se or her per se being able to go out and do this. I just don't feel that the teacher should be allowed back into any school, for that matter, to teach, especially a school that he was known in as a male teacher.
What's your main objection?
The fact that it's extremely confusing to the kids that are there, and he's going in there as they know him as a man.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to walk in there as a woman, it's extremely confusing to these kids. These are kids anywhere from the age of 4 to 12 years of age.
Is it also confusing, do you think, for parents who can't quite get their arms around it?
I don't think so much for the parents. I think the parents understand it and are fine with it if it was any form of another occupation that he had.
Mm-hmm.
I
so
think
you're just saying if he did something else that she wasn't a school teacher, that it would be okay with you?
Exactly.
If it was the
I wouldn't
postal
have a problem
carrier.
with it in the least bit.
Okay, you wouldn't have any problem whatsoever. How about other people in your school system there? Are they as outspoken, or are they against it, or are you in the minority?
There's a lot of different opinions going through the school at this point.
I bet.
There's a lot of people that feel that they don't feel that the teacher should have been given the position back. They feel that he shouldn't be in a teaching profession at all at this point. There's parents who don't mind it. There's past students of his who don't mind it.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this country, we're all about anti-discrimination. Would you consider it discriminatory to say to this particular individual, you can't teach here because of choices you've made in your private life?
I don't feel so, because of the fact that you're dealing with young children.
Mm-hmm.
There's to a point where when this teacher walks into a school where they formerly knew him as a man, these students are extremely outspoken. There's parents that are in this school that are outspoken.
Okay.
And I feel that the teachers are going to, these teachers aren't going to feel comfortable with working with him as he is now.
Okay, thanks for your input. I want to generate a discussion based on that. One thing I wanted to ask is if it wouldn't have made life simpler for everyone if Lily, as she is known now, just taught somewhere else where she was not known, as Kim suggested. Why not a compromise like that?
Well, I mean,
Should she have
that may
to
seem like a
compromise?
compromise, but in reality, you're asking somebody to give up their job. And I appreciate the caller's position, and I really appreciate the fact that as a parent, she is thinking about what is best for her child, because I think that's where we all should be. But I disagree. We have to understand that, in fact, it is discrimination. It might not, she might think it's worthwhile discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
She might think it's okay discrimination, but it is unquestionably a decision that she believes that she should discriminate in the literal sense and in the legal sense on somebody because of who they are. So it is discrimination.
I think it's just highly irresponsible of the school board. I don't know how the school board comes to almost a unanimous vote that this is going to be good for kids. There's one parent who did comment on this situation, and they said, I'm not going to allow you to throw my kid in a petri dish and expect things to just turn out fine. And really, this is what we're dealing with. These kids, we really need to put the kids first. And I don't care if the parents are for it or against it. The reality is, it's the children that are it's a misplaced understanding of freedom for young people, and they're growing up confused, and they're thinking that, you know, what's right for me, it's just right for me, and that's not the way that we should be educating children in the elementary school system.
First of all, I think that, you know, New Jersey has a law prohibiting discrimination, and that the school board was following the law. So that's the first thing, and I think that if you teach children that it's okay not to follow the law or to treat certain people differently just because who they are, I think that sets a very different and a very negative kind of message to children. I think that if we talk to children in a very simple way, in a fair way, I think we're not giving children enough credit for their ability to handle this situation and to at the same time treat teachers that are transgender fairly.
Back to the telephone lines. Let's talk with another Kim. Hi, Kim, it's your call.
Hi.
Tell me what you think about this particular case or this issue in general.
Well, I have two comments that I'd like to make to the panel and to the viewers in general. The first is I think that we're missing a great opportunity to teach these children tolerance of other lifestyles and other choices that some people may have, and that this is a wonderful opportunity to teach children tolerance for these lifestyles, just like we did when we desegregated schools for racial desegregation in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
My second point that I'd like to make is I'm not so sure that this panel will be as effective as maybe you wish it could be for this debate. And the reason why I say that is because while I think that the two panelists, Mara and the other woman, I don't remember her name, are very powerful spokespeople because they're representing lived experience and the experience from the marginalized folks that are conservative on the other side will not see them as credible representatives because they'll see them as biased. And I feel like the panel, maybe on both sides, could have been a little more balanced because of certain biases or prejudices that maybe the other side may have.
Thanks for your opinion, Kim. I have to tell you, everybody's biased on this show except me, okay? I mean, there are two people on this side who feel one way and two people on this side who feel opposite, or else we wouldn't have a show. But I appreciate your call. Let's talk about some of the points, and I return, Reverend, to the teaching tolerance. I mean, she's mentioned this, and now she's related it to race, and certainly you, more so than anyone else in this room, knows what it's like to be discriminated against because of the color of the skin.
Yes.
You could not help the color with which you were born.
Yes.
Just like some of these transgender people will say they could not help the way they were born.
Well, I know that they feel that way. That's been one of the main arguments of the whole homosexual movement from day one. It's an obvious fact that black people were born black. From the day you walk in the hospital, in the nursery, that's a black child. There's no argument there. But I have yet to see someone walk in a nursery, in a hospital, look at a child in the crib and say that child is going to be homosexual. It just doesn't happen that way. Right. Homosexuality, it's very complex, just like all other type of sinful behavior. But it is a choice. Blackness is not a choice, and that's not debatable. The second point we were talking about as far as tolerance and discrimination and bigotry and prejudice and all of these things. Certain discriminations are good. We all have to, all discrimination means is separating one thing from the other. As a drug addict, I was discriminated against, and rightfully so. I have not been incarcerated for over 30 years, but my prints still say that I am an ex-convict, and therefore certain jobs I cannot get because of legal discrimination.
But would you have wanted
this was
to
not
have
legal discrimination? That's the whole thing in this case. It was actually illegal discrimination if they would have gotten rid of her.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. What takes priority? The needs of the child, because you're saying on one hand, discrimination because of sexual orientation versus child abuse. There is child abuse here when children are being brainwashed and being taught these deviant lifestyles and making them appear normal.
Reverend, let me jump in there and say a couple things. First of all, I think in terms of hiring and firing teachers, the most important thing is to consider is the welfare of the children. And I'll say that. What I will not say is the most important thing is the biases and the prejudices of the parents. That is not the most important thing. That has nothing to do with what is best for the children. Unless the parents, I suppose, make a big deal out of it, then that certainly plays into how the children are. But let me for a second, just for a second, say, let's say it's a choice. This is a kind of an absurd argument, first of all, because there is so much scientific proof that homosexuality in almost every circumstance is not a choice. Frankly, if somebody wants that to be their choice, I'd be okay with that, but it's not a choice. We're not talking about homosexuality here anyway. We're talking about questions of gender identity. And again, in almost all cases, it is not a choice. But let's say for a second it is a choice. Do you know what? Religion is a choice. We like to protect people's religions. There was a time that people would be freaked out about Jews being teachers or Catholics being teachers. And that is the extent to which this prejudice is very much like the prejudice based on race or based on religion or other things. We've gone through all of these in the United States where we didn't think people of color were good enough to be teachers, where we didn't think immigrants were good enough to be teachers, where we didn't think Jews were good enough to be teachers. Transgender people is just where it's at right now, and we're going to be past that very soon.
And where we're at right now is time for another break. We have to do that. If you're on the telephone line, please stay with us. Sharon and Kathy, I'm going to be talking with you. If you want to join in and tell us what you think, we're still taking calls, but you can also email me at cn8.tv. Tell me what you think. If a transgender teacher wants to resume working, should he or she be able to do so? Should they do it at a different school? Or is the whole concept just too confusing? That's what we're talking about when we come back.
If you missed an episode of It's Your Call, don't worry. If you have digital cable, you can watch Lynn anytime on demand. Just select Get Local from the On Demand menu and watch It's Your Call anytime, day or night.
as long as he's teaching and not doing anything wrong. What's the difference?
I guess I probably wouldn't want my child around that kind of behavior because I don't believe in it.
I think they should. Otherwise, it's discrimination, isn't it?
It's an element of life, I suppose. So probably should be included.
Those are our in-person comments on this particular topic of a transgender teacher. We'd like to know what you have to say, so we're going to check in with our It's Your Call mailbag in just a moment. First, though, I did promise that Sharon would get on the air, so let's go back to the telephone lines. Sharon, good to have you with us, and thanks for waiting.
Thank you very much for the show tonight. I welcome the opportunity.
Okay, tell me what you think.
Well, I work in mental health. I'm a nurse practitioner. I work in psychiatry. I've worked with people who have substance abuse issues like the minister, and I have also worked with people who have gender issues, but those gender issues aren't usually that they're struggling with their gender. They're usually struggling with the public's, other people's perceptions of their struggle. Mm-hmm. Other people who are intolerant, as your two guests are, and who wrap their own confusion around other people's, around this type of issue.
So are you suggesting that Mark and the Reverend are confused unto themselves?
Am I suggesting it? No, I'm saying it.
Well, I was trying to be politically correct.
Okay. What I'm
Boys, you're confused. I hate to tell you.
What I'm saying is there's all this tossing about of the issue of confusion, and the only confusion I see are the parents and people who are intolerant. I think the people who are confident and sure of their sexuality are not confused. In fact, I think that's probably Lily's, why she waited so long. She probably struggled with the whole issue of becoming who she knew she needed to be and actually was. And at this point in her life probably made this decision that I'm just not going to struggle with this anymore.
Okay.
And I applaud her courage.
All right, Mark, let's respond to this about your confusion.
Well, I'm personally not confused about my gender and who I was made to be. I am a male. But I don't want to minimize, I can't see how anyone could minimize a parent's role in this process. And they are the primary educators of their children, and they should have a voice. And so, we can't say that, it's the parents with the issue. These kids, are very malleable at this age, and you know what? They're taking notes, and they're looking at a man who has now a woman's hair, and yet it talks like a man. It looks like a man, sort of. It's probably a man,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Are you concerned that kids would look at Lily and say, gee, I might like to change my sex? I mean, what do you think would happen to a small child, even if they are malleable? What do you think would happen to?
Well, any child that is questioning, think about it. The children are trying to fit in. And you know what? Maybe they have poor body image. Maybe they're picked last in gym. Maybe they have a mistrust of males or females as a result of the parent situation. Mm-hmm. Any child that's in that situation is I would say, high risk at this point. You bring a teacher into the equation who is just as confused and hurting, that child is going to begin to question. That child may question their own gender and seek fulfillment in a gay situation, or ultimately considers. I was teaching a middle school, and I was a 7th grade teacher, Lynn, and one year I was teaching a girl, the next year I was instructed as her teacher to call her a he. And it was very confusing to me as an adult to now make that transition. And I just imagine for the kids it was even worse.
All right, Sharon, thank you very much. I appreciate your call. As I said, we're going to check in with our It's Your Call mailbag now because we are rapidly running out of time. And I did invite you to email us and tell us what you think. Rob has written, and he says, I would support this teacher if I had children. To not allow one's kids to be taught by this teacher is sending a message that diversity is wrong. Agnes disagrees. It is not appropriate for someone with, in quotes, Lily's history to be teaching children. It is disordered. It is damaging.